Have you ever felt like your life had completely lost its meaning until something unexpected happened and changed everything? Have you ever found yourself looking around, feeling the weight of silence, as if the world had moved on and you had been left behind? If you've been there, you know how difficult it is to find the strength to take the next step. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may surprise you. Today I want to take you inside a special place, a space that has become more than a meeting place. It has become the heart of a new life. This place is a café, but not just any café. It's a café for veterans, for those who, like me, returned from war carrying invisible scars that no one else sees, but that weigh heavily on us every day. When you walk into this café today, you see full tables, laughter mixed with the sound of cups hitting the counter, stories being exchanged between strangers who become friends in a matter of minutes. But it wasn't always this way. Before opening the doors, I too was lost. I wondered if there was still a place in the world for someone like me, someone who had experienced things few could understand. Every detail of this space was born from a moment of pain, of sleepless nights, and of memories that insisted on returning. Maybe you've felt it too, that feeling of being surrounded by people but inside feeling an emptiness that's hard to explain. For many veterans, this emptiness becomes a constant companion. And it was precisely this feeling that led me to think, what if there were a place where we could gather, talk without fear of judgment, and perhaps begin to heal together? This question kept running through my mind. The café began as a simple idea, almost a desperate attempt to fill a hole in my chest, but it grew into something much bigger than I could have imagined. What kept me going was remembering the friends who never returned, the silent promises we made amidst the chaos, and the certainty that I didn't want to waste the second chance I'd been given. Opening a café seemed crazy at first, and you might be wondering, why a café? Why not something else? The answer is simple. A café has always been a meeting place, a place where people feel comfortable sitting down and talking about life. I wanted to create that safe space where each cup served was an invitation to begin again. And it's curious how, little by little, what was once just a project has become a refuge for many. Here, what happened in the past doesn't matter. Each person who enters brings a story, a struggle, a memory that needs to be heard. And each time someone finds the courage to speak, something changes in the air. It's as if the collective weight becomes lighter. Can you imagine what it's like to be in a place like this? What began as empty tables and chairs lined up in silence is now a living, breathing scene, full of voices, memories, and hope. And that's exactly what I want to tell you about. How this space transformed not only my life but the lives of so many others who have passed through here. But for you to understand what this café truly means, I need to go back in time a little and show you how it all began. And you know what makes all this even more special? When stories like this don't just stay on screen, but become a meeting point for those who also carry their own struggles. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what has touched you most so far. It could be a memory, a thought that came to mind, or even an experience you've had that resembles what I'm sharing. Each comment is an opportunity to show that no one needs to go through these moments alone, and you never know who your words might reach. And if you feel like this message resonates with you in some way, like this video, it's a simple yet powerful gesture. Every like helps this story reach others who might need a sign not to give up. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and continue following stories like this, which inspire, challenge, and remind us that there is hope, even in the darkest places. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people who need to hear this kind of message. So write in the comments, leave your like and subscribe, because what comes next will show how this unexpected encounter was just the beginning of a transformation that no one imagined. When I returned home after the war, I thought the hardest part was over. I thought it was enough to be back in the States, to smell the fresh coffee in my mother's kitchen, to hear the familiar voices at Sunday dinner, and everything would fall into place again. But the truth is, the battle within me was just beginning. People looked at me like a hero, but inside I felt like a stranger in my own skin. The streets were the same, the houses in the same place, but it felt like I was walking in a different world, as if there were a glass between me and everyone else. No one saw the weight I carried on my shoulders. No one heard the screams that echoed in my mind as I tried to sleep. It was like living in two worlds at once. The visible world, where I smiled, greeted neighbors, and told them everything was fine, and the invisible world, where I struggled to find meaning in waking up the next day. The invisible scars were the most painful, I didn't have any serious injuries on my body, but I had memories that haunted me at every turn, memories that appeared out of nowhere. The sound of a passing car could take me back to the battlefield. It's hard to explain to someone who's never experienced it. The feeling of your heart racing for no reason, your body going on alert as if in danger, even when you're in the middle of a supermarket or sitting in a random coffee shop. For the first few months, I isolated myself. I spent hours alone in my room staring at the ceiling, trying to understand why everything seemed colorless. Childhood friends came to visit, wanting to take me to parties, to baseball games, but I couldn't fit in. It was as if their language was different. They talked about work, college, relationships, and all I could think about were my friends who stayed behind, the faces we'd never see again. Longing was a constant burden, and deep down, I carried a silent guilt, a feeling that perhaps I didn't deserve to return when others didn't have the same chance. This disconnect grew until it became almost unbearable. I'd go places and not feel truly present. Loud sounds made me alert. Crowds tired me, and even the simple act of ordering a coffee at the counter was a struggle. There were days when I thought no one would ever understand. And maybe that's why so many veterans here in the United States end up lost, because it's hard to talk about what has no name, about what hurts without leaving a mark. And it was at that point that I began to realize I needed to find a way to transform all of this into something that wouldn't destroy me. The first time I thought about creating a space for other veterans was one night when the silence weighed more heavily than the noise. I was sitting in the kitchen with a cold cup of coffee in my hand, and I felt a need to do something different, to break that cycle. It wasn't a clear idea at first. It was more like a whisper inside me, a question I couldn't silence. What if other people were feeling exactly what I was feeling? What if there was a place where we could meet, look into each other's eyes and simply say, "I understand"? That question echoed in my mind for days. Little by little, this idea began to take shape. I began to imagine simple wooden tables, a counter smelling of fresh coffee, photos on the wall that told real stories of courage, and a space where everyone who entered felt safe to take a deep breath. This vision gave me new energy, as if I had finally found a direction. But before reaching this point, I had to face many ghosts. I needed to learn to deal with my own memories. I needed to accept that they were part of who I was, but that they didn't need to dictate my future. This was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, to stop running away and start facing everything that had happened head on. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because when you decide to face your pain head on, something inside you begins to change. It's not quick, it's not easy, but it's the beginning of a real transformation. It's as if you're rebuilding the foundations of your life, brick by brick, until you can build something new. This journey wasn't just about me. It was also about everyone who went through the same struggles and needed a space to remember that there is still hope. Every step I took in this direction was like turning on a light in a dark hallway. I remember the day I finally spoke out loud to a close friend that I wasn't okay. It was strange, as if the words had been stuck inside for months and were coming out all at once. He remained silent, heard me through, and that simple act of listening was the first sign that I wasn't alone. It gave me the courage to keep talking, to seek professional help, and to start building new habits that kept me present. The process was full of ups and downs, but each small victory was a reminder that I was on the right path. If you've ever felt something similar, you know how difficult it is to take that first step. That's why I believe telling this story is so important. Because there are hidden truths about what happens after war that almost no one talks about. And by sharing this, I hope others find the strength to make their own changes. This is a journey of transformation that doesn't end overnight, but begins when we decide not to surrender to the weight we carry. Comment here. I'm rebuilding my path. I want to see how many people here are choosing to take this step with me. Everything changed one night when the silence seemed to scream inside the house. I was alone in the kitchen, the lights almost off, and the sound of the clock was the only thing keeping me in the present. It wasn't a scene from a movie, nor a grand revelation with background music. It was something simple, but it touched me deeply. The memory of a friend who never returned from the war came back powerfully. So real it felt like he was sitting right across the table. I remembered the conversations we'd had, the promises we'd made to try to truly live if we could get home. In that moment, I realized I was wasting the life he would have given everything to have back. It was as if someone had turned on a light inside me, and for the first time in a long time I could see a way out. It's strange, Because these kinds of turning points rarely happen spectacularly. Sometimes it's just a slap in the face, a realization that comes in the middle of an ordinary day and completely changes the direction of your journey. In that moment, I realized I needed to make a decision. Either I continued to wallow in the void, letting the memories dictate who I was, or I transformed all that pain into something meaningful. This choice wasn't easy. It meant letting go of some emotional crutches, facing difficult conversations, and most importantly, admitting that I wasn't okay. Here in the United States, there's still a certain burden when someone talks about mental health, especially among veterans. It's as if we've been trained to endure everything in silence, to never show weakness. But the hidden truth is that asking for help takes more courage than pretending everything is okay. From that day forward, I began taking small steps. First, I called a trusted friend and said out loud that I couldn't cope alone. That decision alone was liberating. Then I sought out support groups for veterans, even though I was afraid I wouldn't fit in. And it was there that I had one of the most powerful experiences of my life. I sat in a room with other men and women who shared similar stories, and for the first time, I felt understood without having to explain every detail. There was something transformative about that environment. The simple exchange of glances, the silent acknowledgement that everyone there was struggling to stay afloat. These encounters gave me the strength to dig deeper, to revisit memories I'd locked away for years. It wasn't a quick process, but it was necessary. Each memory faced head-on lifted some of the weight off my chest. And so the idea of creating a physical space where other veterans could feel the same relief I felt that day was born. Not just a support group, but a living, breathing place, where the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of conversation served as a reminder that there is still life after pain. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because the true impact of this turning point wasn't just on me. It was on the way I began to see the world around me. I began to realize how many people, even outside the military, live silent battles every day. Exhausted workers trying to support their families, single mothers carrying the weight of 2 shifts, young people struggling with anxiety, in a country where the pace never stops. This new mindset helped me see that pain can be a meeting point, something that connects different people in unexpected ways. From there, I began planning every detail of what this space should be. I didn't want something impersonal or cold. I wanted something that conveyed a sense of welcome right from the door. I envisioned walls filled with stories, photographs of people who had overcome their own deserts, and an atmosphere where each visitor felt invited to take off their emotional armor for a few minutes. It was more than opening a business. It was about initiating a collective transformation, creating a place where decisions to start over could be born from a simple cup of coffee and a good conversation. This period was also full of behind-the-scenes details that no one sees. Sleepless nights, meetings with people who helped me develop the concept, financial difficulties, and of course, my own fears of not being able to handle it. But each obstacle was like a test to confirm whether I truly wanted to move forward. And with each challenge overcome, the vision became clearer. I began to notice that the more I shared my idea, the more people showed up willing to help. It was as if this project had a life of its own, attracting those who needed it as much as I did. Ultimately, this journey has taught me that transformation often begins silently, almost imperceptibly. It's that moment when you decide you've had enough, that you'll no longer allow the past to have the final say over who you are. And that's what keeps me telling this story, because I know someone on the other side of the screen might be exactly where I was that night in the kitchen. And maybe that's the spark that ignites their own transformation. Right there, I'm turning the key. I want to see who is ready to take this step with me. The idea for the cafe was born so unexpectedly that, looking back, it almost seems symbolic that it happened on an ordinary morning, sitting in a roadside cafe. I was there, watching people come and go, each in their own rush, their own worries, and suddenly I realized how that simple space had the power to bring together such diverse people in the same place. There was an elderly man reading the newspaper, 2 young men discussing work, a mother trying to calm her young son. It was as if the cafe were an invisible meeting place where lives that wouldn't normally intersect met for a few minutes. And it was in that moment that something clicked inside me. If such a simple place could bring together such diverse people, why couldn't it also be a refuge for those who carry invisible scars? From this thought, I began to envision my own space. Not just any cafe, but a place with soul. I wanted every corner to have meaning, every detail thoughtfully designed to convey warmth. I thought of wooden tables reminiscent of American kitchens, the kind where families sit for leisurely conversation. I imagined walls covered in photos, not just of soldiers in combat, but of veterans smiling with their families, of hugs at emotional reunions, of moments that reminded me that life goes on. The idea grew quickly, as if it had been stored inside me waiting for the right moment to come out. It wasn't about selling coffee. It was about serving something much more important, a slice of peace. I wanted people who entered to feel like they could breathe without fear, that they could let their guard down. For many veterans, myself included, the outside world seems full of triggers, full of memories that bring back feelings we've tried to forget. I wanted that place to be different, a neutral zone, a space where there was no need to pretend everything was okay. The most interesting thing is that, while I was planning the cafe, I realized I was simultaneously rebuilding my own mindset. Each idea that emerged felt like a step in my healing process. The choice of wall colors, for example, wasn't just aesthetic. I wanted tones that brought tranquility, that helped the mind slow down. Even the ambient sound was designed to be calming. It was as if I were designing the place I needed to feel whole again. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because this period was full of unexpected revelations. When I started sharing this idea with others, the reaction was surprising. Some told me it was exactly the kind of place they'd like to frequent. Others confessed they'd never considered how lonely veterans could feel, even when surrounded by people. This showed me that beyond being a space for veterans, the cafe could also educate the community, creating bridges of empathy between worlds that seemed distant. The impact of this realization was enormous. I began to see the project not just as a personal endeavor, but as an opportunity for collective transformation. I envisioned themed nights where families could hear real stories of overcoming challenges, or afternoons where therapists would come to talk in a lighthearted way about mental health, without the heavy office atmosphere. The more I dreamed, the more I saw the potential of all this. And each time I sat down to write down a new idea, I felt closer to transforming suffering into something that would truly help others move forward. This was also a time of difficult decisions. I knew that to make the cafe successful, I would need to open my heart and tell my story honestly, even the parts I preferred to hide. This meant facing the fear of judgment, dealing with curious looks, and above all, admitting my own vulnerabilities. But I realized that this was precisely the power of the project, to show that there's no shame in having scars, that true strength lies in transforming them into bridges that connect people. Planning the cafe brought me back to life. It was as if with each detail I chose, a part of me was restored. I started waking up early, eager to work on the idea, to seek out partners, to visit other establishments to learn from those already in the business. Each conversation brought a new revelation, a new insight that made me believe even more that I was on the right path. And deep down, I knew that when that space became a reality, it wouldn't just be mine. It would belong to everyone who needed a place to start over. Comment below. This place is necessary. I want to know who feels that a space like this would make a difference in their life or the life of someone they know. The first steps to turning that idea into reality were much more difficult than I imagined. Having a vision is inspiring, but putting it into practice is where the real test begins. I remember the first few nights I sat with a sheet of paper in my hand, trying to do the math. The budget just wouldn't add up. Space rental, renovations, equipment, suppliers. It was as if each number were another obstacle in the way. I didn't come from a wealthy family, and I didn't have investors waiting to bet on my dream. Every dollar I had was counted, and the feeling of betting everything on something that could go wrong kept me awake at night. It was at this point that my fears began to intensify. What if no one showed up? What if the cafe opened its doors and was left empty? What if people thought it was a silly idea, or that I was just trying to profit off the pain of other veterans? In the United States, there's a fierce sense of competition, and I knew that if I failed, it would be difficult to try again. This thought haunted me with every decision. It was as if I were walking a tightrope with every step. If I messed up, I could fall for good. Beyond the fear came the opinions that, though well-intentioned, hurt. Are you sure you want to do this? Why don't you get a steady job and guarantee stability? No one will go to a place like that, it's too niche. These phrases echoed in my head for days. It seemed the more I talked about the project, the more resistance arose around me. They weren't just words. They were tests of my resolve. And honestly, there were days when I almost gave up. It seemed easier to shelve the idea and go back to living on autopilot. without exposing myself to the risk of public failure, but something inside me insisted that this project was necessary. Every time I thought about giving up, I remembered the nights I spent alone with my own thoughts and how different things would have been if I'd had a place where I could just walk in, have a coffee, and feel safe. This memory became my strength. I started working extra shifts, taking on temporary jobs to save as much money as possible. I saved on everything. I stopped going out, stopped buying new things, even stopped maintaining my car for a while, because every penny went toward that dream. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because this was the phase that truly shaped my mindset. I realized that my biggest enemy wasn't a lack of money or the opinions of others, but the fear I carried within. The fear of not being good enough, of not being prepared, of exposing myself and being rejected. This fear is something many veterans know well. It's not just the fear of failure, it's the fear of feeling that pain of being alone again. It was during this period that I understood that every decision I made was an act of courage, even the small ones. The behind-the-scenes work of this phase was intense. I spent nights researching business, marketing, and consumer behavior. I didn't want it to be just a business. I wanted it to be something long-term and have a real impact on the community. I discovered government incentives for veteran entrepreneurs, and that gave me the breathing room to continue. Each new piece of information I uncovered was like a brick in the making, and little by little the project took shape. Even so, the fear remained, testing my resolve. One day I received a call from a close friend who told me that perhaps I was dreaming too big, that this kind of project could end up bringing me more frustration than fulfillment. I hung up the phone with a heavy heart, but at the same time, that comment made me even more determined to prove to myself that it was possible. And it wasn't about proving something to others, but about showing myself that I was no longer willing to let fear decide for me. This was the time when I learned to celebrate small victories. Every time I saved enough to buy a new chair, I celebrated. Every time someone said they wanted to volunteer when the cafe opened, it was like a breath of hope. I discovered that the construction journey was, in fact, a journey of self-discovery. And as exhausting as it was, I knew I was on the right path. Right there, I also faced my fears. I want to know who here understands this feeling of having to fight against one's own insecurities to move forward. The opening day was one of the most intense of my life. I woke before sunrise, even though I'd only slept a few hours the night before. My body was exhausted, but my mind was alert, as if every detail mattered more than ever. The cafe was ready. Clean tables, the smell of freshly ground beans in the air, the photos on the walls carefully positioned, as if each one were an invitation to sit down and start a conversation. I looked around and wondered if it would all make sense to whoever walked through the door. It was a mixture of pride and fear, as if my heart were exposed along with the space. The first few hours were silent. I remember standing behind the counter, wiping my hands on my apron repeatedly, waiting. Every time the door opened, my heart raced. The first veteran to enter was a gray-haired man wearing the cap of his former military division. He looked around slowly, as if considering whether he could really stay. I greeted him with a smile and asked if he wanted a coffee. He nodded, but his expression was serious. I carefully placed the cup on the table, and for a few minutes we didn't exchange a word. It was as if that silence said everything we needed to hear. A short time later, 2 more veterans arrived together. They sat at a nearby table and began chatting among themselves. Gradually, the mood shifted. The sound of cups clinking on saucers mingled with low voices, then with shy laughter. The atmosphere came to life in an almost magical way. It was as if the space breathed a sigh of relief, as if it knew it was fulfilling its purpose. I walked between the tables, offering more coffee, and heard fragments of stories being exchanged, tales of missions, of reunions, of fears that still insisted on appearing in the night. What struck me most was when that first veteran, who had entered alone and remained silent, stood up and walked over to the other's table. He pulled out a chair, sat down, and began to speak. It wasn't a speech, just a simple yet emotionally charged outburst. I stood there pretending to tidy up the counter, just so as not to interrupt the moment. That was exactly what I dreamed for that place. A meeting place, a refuge where no one had to pretend they were okay. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because that day taught me so much more than years of reading or preparation could have. I realized that the cafe wasn't just a business or a social project. It was an extension of my own healing journey. Each person who walked in brought with them a piece of truth that needed to be told, and hearing those stories transformed me as much as it transformed them. I saw firsthand how powerful vulnerability is, All it takes is one person to open up for others to feel they can open their hearts too. At the end of the day, when the last cups were cleared and the place fell silent again, I sat at one of the tables and let my emotions flow. I was tired, but with a sense of completeness I hadn't felt in a long time. There, amid the aroma of coffee and the echo of conversations that still seemed to be in the air, I understood that this was only the beginning. The cafe had fulfilled its role on the first day, not only serving hot beverages but also igniting hope. It was at that moment that I realized the journey would be long, that there would be difficult days, but that each story told there would be fuel to keep going. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, as if that space had managed to transform pain into connection in a way that words cannot explain. It was only the first step, but already there was an impact, a transformation already happening before my eyes. Comment below. This beginning touched me. I want to see who else felt the strength of that first day. A few days after the inauguration, stories I could never have anticipated began to emerge, and they gave new meaning to everything I was building. I vividly remember one afternoon, when a man walked in slowly, almost hesitantly, as if he were deciding with each step whether or not to stay. He seemed to be carrying the world on his shoulders. He sat at a table near the window and stared out for a few minutes, without ordering anything. When he finally made it to the counter, he simply ordered a black coffee and returned. Gradually, other veterans began arriving, and naturally, someone struck up a conversation. It was at that moment that he began to speak. He told me he had served in Afghanistan, that he had never been able to tell his own family the details of what he had experienced there, and that, since returning, he had felt like a burden to everyone. He spoke of sleepless nights, of the fear of sleeping and reliving it all over again, of the difficulty of finding a job that wasn't suffocating. No one interrupted him. They just listened, and that respectful silence seemed to be what he needed to finally feel free to vent. When he finished, he took a deep breath and said he couldn't remember the last time he had felt so peaceful in a public place. That scene stuck with me because it represented exactly what I dreamed of for that cafe, a space where nothing needed to be disguised. There, he wasn't just a number in a statistic or a face in an awareness campaign. He was a human being with a unique story, receiving the respect and listening he deserved. After that day, he returned every week, sometimes to chat, sometimes just to sit and soak in the atmosphere. And each time he returned, he seemed lighter, more willing to reconnect with the world outside. Another story that had a profound impact on me happened one weekend. Two veterans who hadn't seen each other in over 15 years ran into each other by chance at a cafe. They had served together in Iraq but lost touch after returning to the United States. When one of them walked in and saw the other sitting in the back of the room, he froze for a few seconds as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The embrace they shared was long, silent, the kind that says more than any words could. They sat together and talked for hours, reminiscing, laughing at situations only they could understand, and also shedding a few tears as they remembered friends who didn't return. That reunion felt like a scene from a movie, but it was happening right there before my eyes. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because each of these stories showed me that coffee had become something much bigger than I imagined. It wasn't just about what I could offer, but about what each person brought with them and shared with others. I saw friendships blossom there. I saw people who had been isolated make plans again. I saw families come together again after a long time. And this taught me something powerful. Healing often happens in community, when someone has the courage to tell their truth and another has the courage to listen without judgment. These encounters also changed my own mindset. I learned that I didn't need to have all the answers or carry the burden of saving someone alone. I just needed to keep that space alive, keep serving coffee, and create opportunities for those connections to happen. It was almost as if the place had become a character in its own right, a silent mediator between pain and new beginnings. With each new story that emerged, I felt more responsible for keeping this space running, because I knew it could be the turning point in someone's life. Seeing these moments of transformation unfold right before me was the fuel that kept me going through the tough days. When the bills got tight, when I doubted my ability to continue, I remembered these scenes and understood that this wasn't just a business. It was a movement, a mission, and this mission was just beginning. Right there. These stories touched me. I want to know who else feels that hearing something like this changes the way they see the world. In the United States, thousands of veterans return home every year carrying something that isn't always visible. For many, the biggest challenge isn't just finding work or readjusting to civilian life, but also dealing with what's going on inside their own minds. That's why spaces like my cafe are so important. They offer something not easily found in hospitals or official programs: humanity. A place where you can sit without filling out forms, without having to explain yourself in detail to be understood, where you can simply exist, with all your pain, without it being seen as weakness. I've realized over time that there's a hidden truth about what truly helps heal trauma. It's a sense of belonging. It's not just formal therapy, though that's crucial, and it's not just medication, though that may be necessary. It's the experience of being in an environment where you feel your presence matters, where someone truly cares about what you have to say. And this kind of connection is something missing in many parts of our society, especially in times when everyone seems stuck in their own routine. In my cafe, the simple act of listening makes a difference. When a veteran tells me he can't sleep without nightmares, no one looks at him strangely. When someone says he feels guilty for coming back while others stayed behind, there's always another veteran who says, "Me too." This exchange of glances changes everything. It's as if there's a silent agreement. Here, you don't have to carry everything alone. This kind of mutual support creates an invisible network that strengthens those who participate. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because talking about veterans' mental health is still taboo for many. There's a stigma that makes many prefer to remain silent, for fear of being seen as fragile or incapable. And that's precisely why we need to create environments that break this mindset. Community spaces, cafes, conversation groups, places where vulnerability is welcome. When someone talks about their fears and finds support, the feeling of isolation begins to fade. It's a process of silent transformation, but one that generates long-term impact. And it's not just for veterans. These spaces end up helping entire families. Parents who don't know how to deal with a child who's returned differently find other parents there who have been through the same thing. Wives who feel alone discover others who understand what it's like to share a home with someone still at war inside. It's a support network that extends far beyond the walls of the cafe. This kind of community creates a foundation for new decisions to be made. Decisions to seek professional help, to try again, to not give up on life. The most revealing thing is that when these meetings become routine, the results begin to appear. People who had lost hope begin to have plans. Veterans who hadn't left their homes in months begin to join running groups, outdoor activities, and volunteer projects. It's as if coffee is just the first step in a journey of personal reconstruction. The impact spreads, reaching families, entire neighborhoods, and inspiring others to create similar initiatives. These spaces are living proof that, however fragmented our society may seem, there's still a thirst for connection. And it's this connection that saves lives. Not dramatically, like in the movies, but in small gestures. In a handshake, a cup of coffee served at the right time, in the attentive listening that keeps someone from feeling invisible. It's a job that requires consistency, patience, and above all, presence. Comment below. Connection saves lives. Because sometimes it's this simple truth that needs to be remembered to continue building places like this. When I look back and remember how it all began, it's impossible not to be moved. That cafe, born from deep pain, ended up becoming the place where I found meaning again. Every conversation that took place there, every story told between sips, was like a brick rebuilding something inside me that I thought had been destroyed forever. I saw with my own eyes men and women who arrived there with their heads bowed, carrying a weight that seemed impossible to release, rising lighter, more willing to carry on. I saw families reunited, friendships restored, and people who thought about giving up deciding to give life another chance. And if all this was possible within a simple cafe, I believe it's possible anywhere where there are people willing to listen, to welcome, to be present. This journey has shown me that transformation isn't a one-off event, but an ongoing process. It's about small choices made every day, opening the door, serving coffee, asking how someone is doing, and truly listening. These are simple decisions that, when added together, have a huge impact. The hidden truth is that behind every seemingly strong and unshakable person, there can be a silent battle. And when we offer a safe space, we give that person a chance to breathe, to speak, to be seen. This may seem small, but believe me, it can change the course of an entire life. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because the message this cafe taught me goes far beyond the walls I built. It speaks to community, to the power we have to create healing environments, even in small ways. You don't need a big project or a lot of money to get started. Sometimes, It's opening your door to a lonely neighbor, calling a friend over for a chat, giving a smile to someone you don't even know. Every gesture counts. Every act of presence can be the turning point in someone's journey. I believe that if more spaces like this existed, we'd have fewer people feeling invisible, fewer broken families, and more stories of hope being told. What began as a personal project has become a movement, something that inspires others to do the same in their communities. And perhaps that's the most beautiful thing of all, realizing that we're not alone, that there are others walking in the same direction, trying to transform pain into something that makes sense. That's why I want you to think of someone right now. Maybe it's a friend who returned from war and closed themselves off from the world, a relative who feels like they're carrying something heavy, or even yourself, if you realize you need a place to start over. Writing about it, talking about it, is an important step in lifting that invisible weight. Putting it into words gives form to what's inside, and that's the first step towards starting to change. Comment below, I know someone who needs to hear this, and because you never know who might be touched by this message and start a new story from here. If you've made it this far, it's because this story spoke to you in some way, and that makes me very happy. This video was made to create a space for reflection, to show that there is still hope even in the most difficult days. So, if this message touched something deep inside you, leave a like to let me know this conversation resonated. This helps keep this space alive and bring more stories like this. And if you want to continue walking with me, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next conversations. I really want to read your comment. Let me know by writing. I stayed until the end, just so I know you were with me every second of this journey. And since you're here, don't stop now. There's a video right here that complements this topic and will delve even deeper into this reflection. Click and stay with me there. I think it will make perfect sense for the moment you're living in right now.